I have an essay in this forthcoming book. It's called the Mind-Body Problem. It's also similar to the Mind-Matter problem. And in the first part of the essay, I show that it doesn't matter at all whether you start with mind or you start with material objects, you get four aspects. Now, for instance, an automobile engine is not just the hardware. There's the design of the engine, and that's on blueprints, and it really doesn't have to be on anything. It could be in a computer. It's a series of proportions and numbers, and it's really abstract, but it's nonetheless objective. It can be passed along, communicated to another person. And that would correspond to what I call the mental aspect of the automobile. Well, then there's also the motivational aspect, the fact that the automobile requires fuel, and it's a way of consuming and transforming energy from one form, from the chemical form in the gasoline, into horsepower on the road. Now that energy and the transformation of energy is not something that's a physical object. It's more alive to those forces that I was talking about before. So that's already three aspects of the automobile rather than just one. Two other than the hardware. But there's a fourth and most important aspect in that the car, like any other machine, has a purpose. In other words, it's a vehicle for transportation. And you can't ignore that because that's the thing that brought it into being. In fact, that's its whole reason for raison d'etre, is to be have a useful function. Well, Aristotle recognized these in the four causes. He called the blueprint the formal cause, and the actual hardware, which is something somebody has to make and put together in a factory, is the efficient cause, drawn from the word to facio, to make. The material cause is that motivational substantive factor that makes it do what it does. I mean, that's a little more difficult, but I won't take time on it. It corresponds to the fuel. And the final cause, and final because it was the first thing that was there, is the purpose. You seem to...
Is one single purpose for an automobile, or...?
Well, it's the single purpose of travel. Now, it doesn't mean you have a single destination. You could have any number of destinations. That's why the first level, which is purpose, is wide open. You could go anywhere you liked, where there was a road, of course. But I mean, the automobile doesn't have any restrictions as to where you should go with it. Well, in precisely the same way, the mental world has four aspects. You have your intuition, which corresponds to your purpose. You have your concepts of how you get there, your navigation plans. You have your emotional drives, the thing that makes you want to do something. And you finally have the sense data, which tells you whether you're using the right thing, or gives you feedback, information from the environment. So that the same four aspects in the automobile physical object and in the mental world, final, formal, material, and efficient causes, they apply to both realms. So then you have to say, well, what is the difference? In spite of the fact that they have the same four aspects, there's a distinct difference. Well, I believe that difference, and this is the second part of the essay, is in the order in which you look at things. Now, from the point of view of the infant, it starts out with emotions, and it only later learns what objects are. This is mother and this is father, and later it learns more and more about the environment, so that the objects in the environment are the ultimate end of its education. The scientist starts at the other end of the road. He starts with these physical objects, and tries to work backward into the emotional, and ultimately he stops there. But if he carried along that road, he'd get to the purpose. So the difference is really the difference between the approach of the scientist, who begins with the physical objects. And notice what he does. He makes an experiment today, an experiment tomorrow, and another experiment, and then he generalizes what was common to all those special experiments and says it's the law of gravity, shall we say. But the law of gravity doesn't require that it be done at such and such a time and with such and such objects. It applies to any weights you drop. So it's a generality, and you're working back into this more elusive realm which has to do ultimately with purpose.